Human saved an injured alien girl from a mountain river. He returned her home, then something happened. Elias Harper adjusted the straps of his backpack as he climbed the rocky slope of the mountain. The air was thin, cold, and sharp against his lungs, but he was used to the challenge. As a human explorer on an alien world, he had grown accustomed to the feeling of being far from home, surrounded by unfamiliar landscapes and strange creatures. The mountain range stretched endlessly before him, jagged peaks cutting into the sky, rivers flowing between them with roaring voices that echoed across the cliffs. It was beautiful, dangerous, and entirely unforgiving. He had been mapping this planet for several weeks now, alone, without any support other than his survival equipment and his own instincts. He trusted himself because if he didn't, no one else would. The landscape was silent except for the wind and the occasional distant call of alien birds with colors he had never seen before. Yet amid the silence, a faint, desperate sound reached his ears. At first he thought it was just the wind, or perhaps the echo of water against rock, but it persisted, a soft, high-pitched cry that sent a shiver down his spine. Elias paused and scanned the valley below, eyes narrowing against the glare of the sun. There, tangled in the white foam of a rapidly moving river, something moved. He could barely make it out, but he recognized immediately that it was not an animal he had ever seen. There was something delicate and fragile struggling in the water, caught in the currents, teetering on the brink of being swept away entirely. Without thinking twice, he dropped his pack, secured it to a nearby boulder and started down the slope, moving with careful urgency. The closer he got, the more he saw. It was a girl, or at least she appeared to be young. Her skin glowed faintly in the sunlight, a soft green that shimmered as the water washed over her. Her hair was silver, like strands of light, and clung to her face in wet tangles. Small translucent wings, delicate as dragonfly wings, trembled against the torrent. She was unconscious, and the river was merciless. Rocks threatened to batter her fragile body with every twist of the current. Elias didn't hesitate. He dropped to a lower ledge and searched the water for a way to reach her. The river roared angrily, but he found a sturdy branch washed along the bank. He tied it to a rope and tested it, swinging it toward her. It barely reached, but it was enough to give him leverage. Taking a deep breath, he plunged into the icy water, letting the current push him toward her. His muscles burned as he grabbed her small form, struggling against the weight of both her body and the river's violent pull. "Hold on," he shouted, though he knew she could not hear him. He wrapped his arms around her and kicked against the current, pushing toward the shallower bank. Pain stabbed his shoulder as he collided with rocks, but he ignored it, focusing only on keeping her above the water. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a calmer pool and he dragged her onto the shore. The river continued its roar behind him, indifferent to the life-and-death struggle it had just witnessed. Elias collapsed beside her, gasping for breath. The girl lay motionless, her wings trembling slightly, water dripping from her hair. Her chest rose and fell shallowly, but her eyes remained closed. He unfastened his pack and pulled out basic medical supplies, bandages, antiseptic, and a small heating pad. He worked quickly, cleaning minor cuts and bruises, wrapping her arms and legs carefully, and pressing the heating pad to her back to fight off the chill. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open. They were large, almond-shaped, and a striking shade of violet that seemed to glow faintly. She stared at him, unblinking, and Elias felt a strange sense of connection pass between them. She could not speak his language, but the look in her eyes said everything: fear, gratitude, and confusion. He offered a gentle smile. "It's okay. You're safe now," he said. His voice sounded strange even to his own ears in this alien valley, but he hoped the tone conveyed reassurance. The girl tilted her head slightly, her wings shivering again, and reached a small hand toward him. Elias took it carefully, noting how fragile she was, almost as if she might shatter under his grip. The wind picked up, sending a shiver through both of them. Elias knew he could not leave her there, not with the river just below and the mountain cliffs all around. He needed to find shelter, someplace safe where she could recover. The girl seemed to understand, gesturing toward the forested slope ahead. Her small hand pointed in the direction of a path that led up the mountain, winding among jagged rocks and strange alien flora. Elias studied her gesture and nodded. "All right, we'll go this way," he said. He lifted her carefully, supporting her back and legs, and started moving toward the slope. She rested her head on his shoulder, quiet but alert, watching every step. Elias noticed how her body glowed faintly in the dim light beneath the trees, as if some energy from within her responded to his presence. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but enough to make him wonder what kind of being she was. The path was treacherous, lined with jagged rocks and roots that seemed almost alive in the dim light. Elias moved carefully, one step at a time, balancing his own weight and hers. Several times he stumbled and nearly fell, but each time he corrected himself, determined to protect her. She murmured faintly in a language he did not understand, but the sound was soft, melodic, almost like wind chimes. He smiled faintly. It was the first sound of her voice he had heard, and it reassured him that she was alive and aware. After an hour of careful climbing, they reached a plateau where the forest opened up into a small valley. Here, the sunlight fell gently, illuminating the strange crystalline structures scattered around. The valley was filled with glowing plants and small pools of water, and the air was warmer, carrying the scent of alien flowers. The girl's eyes lit up, and she started pointing toward one of the larger structures in the distance. Elias followed her gesture, realizing she wanted to go there. They reached the structure, a building made of what looked like crystal and living wood intertwined. The doors opened silently, revealing a softly lit interior filled with other beings, similar to the girl but older and larger. Their eyes widened at the sight of Elias, wary but not hostile. The girl let out a small cry and they rushed forward to her, surrounding her in a protective circle. Elias stepped back slightly, unsure how to communicate, but he gestured to show he meant no harm. One of the adults, taller and adorned with intricate markings, stepped forward. She studied him for a long moment, her eyes sharp and calculating. Then slowly she nodded. "You saved her," the being said, her voice clear in his mind rather than through sound. Elias realized they communicated telepathically, which explained why the girl had not spoken. He nodded. "Yes, she was in the river. I couldn't leave her there." The adult's eyes softened. "You are brave, human. She would not have survived without you." Elias felt a strange warmth at the praise. It was the first time someone had acknowledged his actions in a way that felt truly meaningful. He looked at the girl, who was now safe in the arms of her family, her wings trembling but relaxed. For the first time in weeks, Elias allowed himself to sit down, exhaustion catching up to him. He looked around the valley, taking in the glowing plants, the alien structures, and the serene water pools. He realized how different this world was from anything he had known, yet in a strange way, it felt like home. The girl glanced back at him, her violet eyes locking with his. There was a silent understanding between them, a bond formed not through words but through action, courage, and trust. Elias smiled faintly, feeling that connection deeply. As night began to fall, the valley glowed softly under twin moons, and Elias realized he could not simply leave. He had saved her life, yes, but he could not abandon her now, not when there were dangers beyond the mountains he could not yet see. For the first time, he understood that his journey on this planet had changed. It was no longer about mapping and exploration. It was about protection, trust, and an unexpected friendship that crossed species and worlds. The girl settled closer to her family, but she kept looking at Elias, her small hand brushing against his. He understood then that she was not only safe, but also accepting him as a part of her life now. and Elias, for the first time on this lonely planet, felt that he had a reason to stay, a purpose beyond survival. The stars began to appear in the sky, bright and countless, stretching across the heavens in a breathtaking display. Elias looked up and took a deep breath. The mountains, the river, and the glowing valley all seemed to whisper possibilities. He had saved her from death, but somehow he felt that their story had only just begun. Something important, something that could change much more than just their own lives, was waiting ahead. He watched the girl close her eyes, finally resting after her ordeal, and he knew that whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. And in that moment, under alien stars and glowing trees, Elias Harper, human explorer, understood the true meaning of courage. Not the bravery to face danger alone, but the choice to protect someone else, even when the odds were impossible. The valley was quiet now, bathed in the gentle glow of twin moons. Elias Harper watched as the alien girl who had survived the river moved among her family. Her small hands traced the edges of the glowing structures, her wings fluttering softly as she explored her surroundings. Despite the calm, Elias could feel the tension beneath it all. He knew that in such a strange and isolated place, dangers could appear at any moment, and the world outside the valley was vast and unpredictable. He adjusted his pack, checking his supplies once again. He had enough food for several days, but he knew they might need to move if the valley wasn't completely safe. The girl, noticing his movements, tilted her head toward him. She seemed curious, but there was also trust in her gaze. Elias smiled gently. She was learning to understand him, and he her, even without shared words. The next morning, the valley stirred with life. Creatures with shimmering scales moved between the crystal-like trees, and the air was filled with soft hums and whispers of the alien flora. Elias had learned quickly that every movement, every sound might signal life, predator, or danger. He kept close to the girl, who walked beside him, her small hand occasionally brushing his arm as if seeking reassurance. They needed to leave the valley. Though it was a place of relative safety, Elias knew it could not protect them forever. The girl's family watched them prepare, their eyes reflecting gratitude and concern. One of the adults, a tall being with intricate markings along her arms, stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. Through mental images, Elias understood their silent communication. The girl was being asked if she wanted to go. She nodded, her small wings flaring once before settling. Elias felt a strange warmth. She had chosen to trust him fully. The path ahead led into the dense alien forest that surrounded the valley. Elias moved cautiously, noting every shadow and every rustle. The forest was alive with color and motion, but also with danger. He spotted creatures moving between the trees, some harmless, others less so. The girl, surprisingly agile, stepped lightly on the glowing moss, her feet making almost no sound. She paused, looked back at him, and gestured for him to follow. Elias followed without hesitation. As they moved deeper, he noticed subtle changes in the girl. Her skin glowed slightly more brightly when she was near certain plants, and small sparks of energy danced around her fingers when she touched water or leaves. He had no idea what these abilities meant, but he sensed they were powerful. More importantly, they were her gift, and possibly her shield. He felt a renewed sense of responsibility. He was no longer just guiding and protecting her physically. He had to respect and understand the unique abilities she possessed. Several hours into the journey, a sudden noise startled them. A low growl echoed through the trees, vibrating in Elias's chest. He froze, scanning the dense underbrush. From between two giant crystalline trunks emerged a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It had 6 legs, armored in hard plates that reflected the forest light, and 2 glowing eyes that locked onto them instantly. Its mandibles clicked as it advanced. Elias dropped his pack and quickly unrolled his emergency rope. He placed it strategically between himself and the creature, hoping to slow it down. The girl, surprisingly, didn't scream or panic. Instead, she held out a small hand toward the creature, her violet eyes focused. A faint light pulsed from her fingers, forming a shimmering shield in front of her. The creature hissed and recoiled, surprised by the display, giving Elias the opening he needed. He grabbed the girl and moved behind a fallen tree, keeping them both safe. He exhaled slowly. "You have powers, abilities. I didn't know what you could do," he murmured. The girl looked at him, as if to say, "I've been trying to show you." Elias realized that while she was physically small and fragile, her strength was not to be underestimated. Together, they were already learning how to face dangers in a way neither could alone. As they continued, the terrain became more treacherous. The forest opened into a canyon filled with mist and jagged cliffs. Narrow paths wound dangerously close to sheer drops, and small streams of water fell from above, slicking the rocks. The girl moved carefully, holding onto Elia's arm for support. Several times he had to stop her, gently guiding her away from edges that were too risky. The bond between them grew stronger with every step. On the second night, they made camp in a small clearing protected by rock formations. Elias set up a small fire, careful to avoid startling any nearby wildlife. The girl sat near him, wings folded around her. He offered some of his rations, small cubes of nutrient-dense food designed for humans. She sniffed it, then nibbled carefully. He smiled. Even without understanding each other's language, they were sharing survival and in doing so, building trust. The night passed quietly, but Elia's mind remained alert. He knew that the forest held dangers, not all of which were visible. The girl occasionally shivered, and he noticed that her glow seemed to dim slightly, as if she were conserving energy. He put a protective arm around her, and for the first time she leaned against him, her small body trusting entirely in his presence. Elias felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known before. The next morning, they resumed their journey. Birds with iridescent feathers flitted overhead, and alien insects hummed softly around them. The girl began pointing out paths through the forest, indicating safer routes. Elias followed, marveling at her instincts. At one point, they came across a river, smaller than the one from which he had rescued her but fast-flowing and full of jagged rocks. The girl's eyes widened and she began gesturing urgently. Elias understood immediately. They needed to cross carefully. He found a fallen tree spanning the river and tested it. It was narrow and unstable, but it would have to do. He held out a hand to the girl. She hesitated, then took it, placing one foot carefully on the tree. Elias followed, walking slowly to keep his balance. Midway across, the tree creaked ominously. The girl froze, wings trembling. Elias whispered softly, "I'm right here. Trust me." Inch by inch, they moved across, finally reaching the other side safely. She looked up at him with wide, grateful eyes, and he felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't expected. As they climbed higher into the forested mountains, they began to encounter signs of others. Strange markings etched into trees, small footprints unlike anything Elias had seen, and the occasional faint hum of energy in the air. The girl seemed aware of these signs and became alert, her senses sharp. Elias realized that while he had been trained to survive in human wildernesses, this world required a different kind of awareness. He needed her guidance, just as much as she needed his protection. After several days of travel, they finally reached a plateau that overlooked a hidden valley. The view took Elias' breath away. Crystalline structures jutted from the earth, glowing faintly in the sunlight. Small streams reflected the sky like mirrors, and alien plants of every color imaginable filled the valley floor. The girl's face lit up, wings fluttering with excitement. She ran ahead, beckoning him to follow. Elias approached cautiously, mindful of potential dangers. As they entered the valley, the girl's family emerged. The adults were taller than the girl, with skin that shimmered in soft greens and blues, and eyes that glowed faintly violet. They moved with grace and alertness, surrounding her protectively. The girl cried out softly and they rushed to her, their movements swift but careful. Elias stepped back, unsure how to act. One of the adults turned to him, studying him intently. He realized they were communicating not with words but through mental images and feelings. He sensed their gratitude, their concern, and their recognition of the bond he had formed with the girl. "You saved her," the adult said, their voice a clear image in his mind. Elias nodded. "I couldn't leave her in the river," he thought back. The adult's eyes softened and they gestured for him to come closer. Elias approached cautiously. The girl clung to his side, wings still trembling but less so. The adult touched her forehead lightly, then turned to him. "You are welcome here. You have shown bravery and care," they communicated. Elias felt the words deeply, more than he would have from any spoken language. He realized that his actions had earned not only their gratitude but also their trust. The valley, safe and vibrant, offered a reprieve from the dangers of the forest and mountains. The girl explored her home, wings fluttering as she touched the glowing plants and crystal structures. Elias watched her, marveling at the beauty and complexity of this world. He understood that the girl's life had been changed by his actions, but he also realized that his life was forever changed by her trust and the bond they had formed. As night fell over the valley, the twin moons casting silver light over the crystalline structures, Elias knew that this was only the beginning. The journey to bring her home had revealed dangers, yes, but it had also revealed hope. In a world filled with unknowns, human courage and compassion had found a way to protect and save a life. And in that quiet, glowing valley, under alien stars, Elias Harper understood that he was no longer just an explorer. He was a guardian, a friend, and a part of something far greater than himself. The valley was quiet, almost too quiet. Elias Harper had been staying near the edge, keeping watch as the alien girl moved among her family. Her laughter, soft and melodic, drifted through the glowing structures, and he found himself smiling despite the exhaustion from the journey. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe that danger had passed, that the girl was finally safe in her hidden home. But the feeling of calm did not last. As the twin moons climbed higher, casting silvery light across the valley, Elias noticed movement in the sky, something unnatural, mechanical, and purposeful. At first he thought it might be clouds, but the shapes shifted too deliberately, reflecting the moonlight in sharp angles. The girl's wings shivered instinctively, and she ran to him, pressing close. Elias' instincts kicked in. He crouched, scanning the horizon. Above the valley, several alien ships hovered silently. Their design was unfamiliar, angular and sleek, with dark surfaces that reflected nothing. They were not the friendly inhabitants of the valley, nor were they the natural predators of the forests. Elias felt a chill. Whatever these ships represented, they were not here to observe. They were here to take, to hunt. The girl's family reacted immediately. They formed a protective circle around her, their movements synchronized and sharp. Their glowing eyes scanned the skies as if they could see the intentions of the ships. The girl tugged at Elias' hand, her small fingers tight around his. He felt her fear, but also her trust. He squeezed her hand in return, silently promising that he would protect her no matter what. A deep hum vibrated through the valley as the ships descended. From their hulls, bright beams of light scanned the terrain, probing for life forms. Elias realized that they had been tracked for some time. The girl's presence, her unique energy, must have drawn attention from far beyond this hidden world. He quickly assessed the situation. The valley offered some natural defenses, crystalline structures that could be used for cover, and dense clusters of glowing plants that might obscure them. But the enemy had superior technology. The leader of the girl's family stepped forward. Elias sensed a surge of communication, images and feelings passing from the adult to him. They were warning him. The intruders were after the girl, believing her to possess a rare and powerful ability. If she was captured, the consequences could be catastrophic. Elias nodded silently. He had no weapons that could match the ship's, but he had his mind, his resourcefulness, and the determination to protect someone who trusted him completely. As the first of the ships hovered closer, a beam of light scanned the valley near the girl's home. Elias grabbed her small hand, pulling her behind a cluster of crystalline formations. The girl's violet eyes widened, and she extended a tiny hand toward the approaching threat. A faint glow emerged from her fingers, forming a shimmering barrier in front of her. The light pulsed in rhythm with her breathing, creating a protective shield that flickered but held. Elias realized that her abilities were not just defensive, they could be shaped, controlled, and amplified. The enemy ships began to descend further, lowering small crafts toward the valley floor. Elias and the girl moved quickly, staying behind cover. He guided her through narrow pathways between glowing plants and crystalline outcrops. The girl's powers reacted to the terrain. As she touched the crystalline walls, energy flowed outward, creating illusions of multiple copies of them, confusing the intruders. Elias could hardly believe what he was seeing. This tiny girl, fragile and injured just days ago, was now defending herself in ways he could not have imagined. The first of the alien scouts appeared, moving toward the glowing wall where Elias and the girl had been moments before. The illusions confused them, but they adapted quickly, deploying scanning devices that detected heat and energy signatures. Elias realized that their safety was temporary. He needed a plan, something that combined his own human ingenuity with the girl's extraordinary abilities. He whispered to her, hoping she understood, "We have to make them think we're somewhere else. Can you make the light show again?" She nodded, focusing her energy, and the crystals along the path glowed brighter. Light reflected and scattered, creating multiple illusions of them running along different routes. The scouts hesitated, their sensors unable to pinpoint the real targets. Elias led the girl along a narrow ridge, moving silently, every step calculated to avoid the enemy's detection. Suddenly, one of the ships fired a pulse at the illusions. The crystals shattered slightly, sending fragments clinking down the ridge. Elias grabbed the girl, shielding her with his body, and moved quickly to a safer ledge. The girl, despite the fear in her eyes, maintained her focus, projecting a shimmering shield around them. Elias marveled at her strength. She was small, yes, but in combination with his tactics, she was formidable. Hours passed like this. They moved from cover to cover, using the alien terrain, the glowing plants, and her abilities to stay ahead of the enemy. Elias guided her through natural tunnels in the crystalline structures, occasionally stopping to let her rest. He noticed how she absorbed energy from certain crystals, her glow becoming brighter with each pulse. He realized she was drawing strength from the land itself, connecting with it in a way humans could not. As they reached the outer edge of the valley, Elias paused. Below them, the enemy scouts were regrouping, sending signals to the ships above. It was clear they were preparing a full assault. Elias knew they could not outrun them forever. He looked at the girl, whose small face was set with determination despite the exhaustion. She looked up at him, silently asking what they would do next. Elias thought quickly. The valley was full of natural traps, ledges, and energy-rich crystals. If they could use these to their advantage, they might be able to create a defense that even the technologically superior ships could not easily overcome. He pointed to a cluster of large crystals nearby. "We can use those," he said. She nodded, understanding immediately. They moved toward the cluster, careful to avoid being seen. Once in position, Elias directed the girl to project her energy into the crystals. The crystals began to glow, reflecting light in every direction, creating a dazzling display that masked their movements. He used his knowledge of physics and angles to position small, reflective surfaces from shards and stones, amplifying the light and confusing the enemy sensors even further. The girl's energy and his tactical thinking combined perfectly. The alien scouts moved closer, cautious but relentless. Elias whispered to the girl, "When I give the signal, push everything forward." She nodded, tiny hands glowing brighter. At his command, she released a pulse of energy that spread through the crystals, creating an intense reflection of light and energy that forced the enemy to retreat momentarily. The scouts were disoriented, unsure of what was real and what was illusion. Elias did not waste the moment. He led the girl through a hidden tunnel in the crystalline wall, moving quickly toward the higher ridges. From there, they could see the entire valley, the intruders below, and the ships hovering in the distance. Elias realized they had survived the immediate danger, but the enemy would not give up. They were being hunted for the girl's unique abilities, and their pursuers would stop at nothing. As they paused to catch their breath, the girl turned to him, her violet eyes shining with gratitude and trust. Elias felt a deep sense of responsibility. She had survived the river, the forest, and now this attack, but she still relied on him. He had to find a way to protect her fully, not just temporarily. Night fell, and the twin moons cast long shadows over the valley. The enemy ships retreated slightly, but Elias knew they would return with reinforcements. He and the girl moved to a higher plateau, hidden among rocks and glowing plants. Here, they could rest safely for a short time and plan their next move. As they settled, Elias reflected on what had happened. He had come to this planet as an explorer, mapping and observing, never imagining he would become a guardian in a battle he did not fully understand. Yet here he was, relying on his skills, his wits, and the trust of a small alien girl whose powers were beyond comprehension. He realized that survival was no longer just about his own life. It was about protecting someone else, someone innocent, someone whose existence might change the balance of an entire world. The girl, exhausted but alert, leaned against him. Elias felt her small hand rest on his arm, and he understood the depth of her trust. They had survived together, not just through strength, but through cooperation, courage, and understanding. Elias knew that the coming days would bring greater challenges, but he also knew that together, they could face anything. The stars sparkled above, and the soft hum of the valley below reminded him that this world was alive, filled with energy and possibility. Elias Harper, human explorer and now protector, gazed at the horizon, ready for whatever would come next. The girl stirred slightly, looking up at him with a silent promise. They would face the danger together, and nothing would break the bond that had formed between them in the face of impossible odds. The morning light spilled over the valley, turning the crystalline structures into glimmering towers of color. Elias Harper had spent the night perched on a high ridge with the alien girl beside him, watching the valley below. Though the enemy ships had retreated, he knew they would return. Every movement in the trees and sky reminded him of the danger that still lingered. But this morning the valley felt different. There was a quiet energy in the air, something ancient and powerful, almost as if the land itself was aware of them. The girl stirred beside him, wings twitching lightly. She seemed restless, drawn to something beyond the valley, beyond the forest. Elias noticed the faint glow around her intensifying, pulsing in rhythm with her breathing. He had seen this before during moments of extreme focus, but this time it felt deeper, more significant. He wondered if it was a warning, or perhaps a call. As they descended into the valley, the girl led him toward a cluster of ancient ruins nestled at the base of the mountains. The structures were unlike anything Elias had seen before. Smooth, curved walls of crystal intertwined with living wood, carved with symbols that seemed to move and shift when he looked at them. The energy in the air was almost tangible, vibrating in his chest and making his hair stand on end. The girl paused before the largest structure, placing her hands on the crystal wall. Light flowed from her fingers into the symbols, illuminating them in a soft, warm glow. Elias watched in awe as images appeared in the crystal, holographic scenes that seemed to tell a story. He saw the girl, much older, interacting with beings of great power, shaping energy, and connecting with the planet in ways that were impossible for humans. He realized then that this child, fragile as she appeared, carried the legacy of a long-lost civilization. The adult of her family, the one who had first welcomed him, emerged from the shadows, speaking directly into Elia's mind. "You see now why they hunt her. She is a descendant of the ancients, the ones who could harmonize with this world's energy. Her abilities can create or destroy on a scale far beyond most species. That is why your courage is needed, not just for her, but for the balance of many worlds." Elias took a deep breath. He had known the girl was special, but he had not imagined the full extent of her potential. His mind raced as he considered the implications. If the hostile faction returned, they would not stop at capturing her. They would attempt to use her power for their own gain, regardless of the cost. He had to protect her, not just from immediate danger, but from those who would seek to manipulate her entire life. The girl turned to him, violet eyes wide and trusting. Elias felt a surge of determination. He would not fail her. Together they would face whatever came, relying on her abilities and his knowledge, strategy, and courage. They explored the ruins cautiously, discovering chambers filled with glowing artifacts, inscriptions, and energy sources. The girl seemed to recognize certain symbols, touching them with reverence, and Elias noticed the crystals responding to her presence, pulsing with energy. He realized that the ruins themselves were alive, connected to the girl in a way he could not yet fully understand. Suddenly, the peaceful exploration was interrupted by the hum of approaching ships. The enemy had returned, larger in number and more aggressive. Elias and the girl moved quickly, finding cover among the ruins. The adult of her family appeared beside them, projecting a mental image that showed the incoming attackers and suggested a defensive plan. Elias studied the layout of the ruins. There were narrow passages, hidden chambers, and energy-rich crystals that could be used as both shields and weapons. He quickly devised a strategy, combining human tactics with the girl's abilities. She could manipulate energy, create shields, and form illusions, but she needed guidance in using her powers efficiently. Elias directed her, showing her how to focus her energy into specific crystals that amplified their effects, creating barriers and confusing the enemy's sensors. The first wave of attackers arrived. They moved with precision, deploying small drones and scanning devices. Elias and the girl waited until they were in the perfect position, then activated the energy crystals. Light exploded across the ruins, forming shifting illusions that made it appear as if there were dozens of them moving in every direction. The attackers hesitated, their sensors struggling to identify the real targets. Elias led the girl through hidden passages, using her powers to manipulate the crystals and maintain the illusion of greater numbers. The battle of wits continued for hours. The attackers adapted quickly, but Elias' ingenuity and the girl's abilities allowed them to stay ahead. He used simple physics, reflections, and angles to amplify the energy pulses, directing light and sound to confuse the enemy further. The girl responded with precision, her energy flowing in harmony with his instructions, creating shields and decoys that were almost impossible to distinguish from reality. During a brief pause, Elias caught his breath and observed the girl. She was small, tired, but unwavering in her determination. Her eyes met his, and in that silent moment he understood the depth of their bond. She trusted him completely, and he trusted her. Together, they had faced dangers that would have overwhelmed either one alone. As night fell over the ruins, the attackers regrouped, attempting a different approach. Elias and the girl anticipated this and had prepared. They activated the remaining energy crystals, creating a network of barriers and illusions that made the ruins appear uninhabitable. The attackers, unable to penetrate the defenses and confused by the illusions, were forced to retreat. Elias allowed himself a moment of relief, but he knew this was only temporary. The enemy would return, and they would come with greater force. He turned to the girl, who was resting briefly, her wings folded but still glowing faintly. He knew he needed a longer-term solution, one that would protect her and allow her to understand and control her abilities fully. The adult of her family approached, projecting an image of a hidden sanctuary deeper in the mountains. This place, they explained, was a site where the girl could train and strengthen her powers safely, away from immediate threats. Elias agreed that this was the best course of action. He would guide her there, teach her what he could, and together they would prepare for the challenges to come. They traveled cautiously through narrow mountain passes, avoiding detection and using the girl's abilities to sense and manipulate energy sources along the way. Elias marveled at her connection to the world. She could feel the flow of energy in plants, rocks, and even the air. It was as if the planet itself recognized her as one of its own. Along the journey, Elias taught her basic strategies: how to observe the environment, predict movement, and use natural elements to their advantage. He showed her how to focus her energy more efficiently, how to create barriers that could withstand greater force, and how to use illusions to mislead enemies. The girl learned quickly, absorbing every lesson with keen intelligence and determination. One evening, as they rested near a glowing stream, Elias realized how far they had come. They had survived the river, the forest, and multiple attacks, and yet the girl had grown stronger, more confident, and more in control of her powers. He felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility. She was not just a child he had saved. She was becoming a force capable of shaping the world around her. Finally, they reached the hidden sanctuary. It was a cavern deep within the mountains, filled with energy crystals and ancient inscriptions. The air vibrated with a soft hum, and the girl's glow intensified as they entered. Elias knew this was the perfect place for her to train, learn, and prepare for the dangers that lay ahead. The adult of her family stayed briefly to guide them through the sanctuary, showing the girl how to connect with the energy sources safely. Elias observed quietly, impressed by the depth of knowledge and the subtle power of the girl's lineage. Once the guidance was complete, the adult departed, leaving Elias and the girl alone. Elias turned to her, smiling gently. "This is your place now. Here you can grow stronger, learn more about yourself, and prepare for whatever comes next. I'll stay with you, and together we'll make sure nothing can harm you." The girl's eyes shone with gratitude, and she reached out, touching his hand. Elias felt a warmth spread through him, a silent bond that promised trust, protection, and partnership. The night settled over the sanctuary, peaceful for the first time in days. Outside, the world remained dangerous, but inside, the girl was safe, and Elias had a plan. He knew that the hostile faction would not give up, that challenges lay ahead, but he also knew they were ready. Together, they had survived impossible odds, learned to trust each other, and discovered strengths they never knew they possessed. As Elias sat beside her, watching the soft glow of the energy crystals illuminate her small form, he understood the truth of their journey. It was not just about survival or protection. It was about preparation, growth, and understanding. The girl's heritage held incredible power, and it was his responsibility to help her harness it safely. They would face whatever the galaxy sent next together, combining human ingenuity and alien energy in ways the universe had never seen before. And in that moment, deep within the sanctuary, Elias Harper realized that the girl he had rescued was no longer just a child in need of protection. She was a leader in the making, a being whose abilities could shape the future. And he, a human far from home, had become an essential part of that future. The sanctuary was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the energy crystals. Elias Harper had spent weeks helping the alien girl understand her powers, teaching her how to control and focus the energy flowing through her. She had grown stronger, her violet eyes brighter and more confident. No longer the frightened child he had rescued from the mountain river, she now moved with purpose, her wings fully extended, glowing faintly as if infused with the life of the planet itself. Elias watched her from the edge of the cavern, a small smile on his face. He felt a deep pride, but also a sense of responsibility. The galaxy beyond the mountains was still dangerous, filled with those who sought to exploit the girl's abilities. The enemy faction that had pursued them was powerful and persistent, and he knew their retreat had only been temporary. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. The girl nodded, her small hand brushing against his. Elias felt the warmth of her trust and understood that their bond had become unbreakable. She had survived rivers, forests, and hostile attacks, and now she was prepared to face whatever threats awaited. As they stepped outside the sanctuary, the valley stretched before them in the pale light of dawn. Elias scanned the horizon, noting the absence of ships or scouts, but his instincts warned him that the calm would not last. He had prepared escape routes, traps, and illusions, but there was no way to know when the enemy might strike again. The girl's wings twitched nervously and Elias placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Together," he said simply. She nodded. Together they were strong, and she now had the knowledge and control to defend herself in ways he could not have imagined. Suddenly, a hum resonated through the valley, faint at first, then growing louder. From the distant horizon, a fleet of ships appeared, larger and more advanced than the last. Elia's heart sank, but he remained calm. He had a plan, and he knew that with the girl's abilities, they could turn even overwhelming odds into a chance for victory. The girl focused, her energy radiating outward. Crystals along the valley floor and walls began to glow, responding to her presence. Light pulsed rhythmically, creating a network of illusions that made it appear as if the valley was filled with dozens of them. The ships hesitated, sensors struggling to distinguish real targets from reflections and decoys. Elias moved alongside the girl, guiding her and shaping the energy, projecting barriers and creating pathways that led their pursuers into dead ends and natural traps. As the ships descended, launching energy pulses toward the valley, Elias and the girl moved swiftly. They led the attackers into a canyon lined with jagged crystals. Elias directed the girl to focus her energy into the largest crystals, which began to resonate and amplify her power. When the enemy pulses struck, they were reflected and magnified, sending the attackers' ships into disarray. Several drones were destroyed, and the remaining ships were forced to retreat temporarily. Elias breathed a sigh of relief but knew the battle was far from over. The enemy would return, stronger and more determined. He turned to the girl, whose wings shimmered in the valley light. She had grown in confidence, her abilities now precise and controlled. She looked up at him, understanding clearly that they would face the next challenge together. In the following days, Elias taught her more advanced strategies, combining human tactics with her alien abilities. They set up hidden energy channels along the valley floor, creating traps that could immobilize or confuse intruders. The girl learned to manipulate these channels, projecting energy waves, shields, and illusions with precision. Together, they transformed the valley into a fortress, invisible to those who did not understand the flow of energy. The girl also began to understand her connection to the planet. She could sense the flow of energy in the forests, the rivers, and the mountains. By channeling it through her body, she could amplify her abilities, protect herself and others, and even communicate with the valley's natural creatures. Elias watched her grow with awe and pride, realizing that she was no longer just a child in need of protection. She was a leader, capable of guiding others and defending her world. One morning, As they surveyed the valley from a high ridge, a transmission reached Elias through a small device he had recovered from one of the enemy scouts. The message was clear. The faction had reported the girl's location to a galactic council that governed multiple worlds. The council, intrigued and cautious, planned to intervene. Elias realized that the stakes had grown far beyond the valley. The girl's life, her abilities, and her legacy were now matters of galactic importance. Elias did not panic. Instead, he shared the news with the girl. Though her eyes widened, she did not waver. "We are ready," he said, and she nodded. Together, they devised a plan. If the council came, they would not fight blindly. They would demonstrate the girl's abilities, show the strength of their bond, and negotiate her safety. Elias had learned that courage was not just about fighting. It was about knowing when to act, when to show strength, and when to protect. The day the council arrived, massive ships descended slowly into the valley. The valley's glow and the girl's energy illuminated the ships, casting shadows and reflections across the crystalline walls. Representatives from multiple worlds stepped out, observing cautiously. Elias led the girl forward. She radiated calm confidence, her energy pulsing gently as she stepped into the open. The council's leader, a being with silver skin and eyes like molten gold, approached. Elias could sense their scrutiny, their evaluation of the girl's power. He stepped beside her, standing tall. "She is safe, trained, and in control," he said. "Her abilities are hers to command, and she has the right to live without fear." The girl extended her hands, projecting a soft wave of energy that demonstrated her control. Crystals lit up, barriers formed, and small illusions appeared around the council members, harmless but clear proof of her power. Elias saw the council's expressions shift from suspicion to respect. The girl's abilities were not weapons. They were part of her, part of the planet, and a force for protection and harmony. After a long discussion, the council agreed. The girl would remain in the sanctuary, under her own control, with Elias by her side as her guardian and mentor. Her family returned to the valley, embracing her with joy and relief. The girl looked up at Elias, her violet eyes shining, and he smiled, feeling the depth of their journey together. In the weeks that followed, Elias continued to guide her. The valley became a place of learning and growth. Creatures of the forest came to understand her presence, responding to her energy and aiding in the protection of the sanctuary. The girl trained daily, mastering her abilities and learning to use them with precision and care. Elias helped her understand strategy, planning, and the importance of trust and patience. Word of their success spread across nearby systems. The girl's abilities, combined with Elias' guidance, became a symbol of cooperation between humans and alien species. Other worlds sent observers to learn from their methods, to see how courage, trust, and friendship could overcome fear and aggression. Elias watched all this with quiet pride, knowing that he had played a part in something far greater than himself. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the valley, Elias and the girl sat together on a high ridge. She leaned against him, her wings folding softly around her. The valley below glowed with energy, peaceful and safe for the first time in years. Elias felt the weight of their journey and the strength of what they had built. "You've come a long way," he said softly. She looked up at him and smiled. Elias realized then that their bond had changed him as well. He had come to this planet as an explorer, a stranger far from home, but he had become a protector, a teacher, and a friend. The girl had saved him in ways he had not understood, through trust, resilience, and the courage to face impossible odds. In that quiet moment, under alien stars and glowing crystals, Elias Harper understood the full meaning of their journey. It had been about survival, yes, but more than that, it had been about hope, growth, and the power of connection. Together, they had faced the impossible, defeated overwhelming odds, and created a future where both humans and aliens could thrive side by side. The girl stretched her wings, small sparks of energy dancing across their surface. Elias smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, full of unknowns and challenges, but together they would face whatever came. The bond they had formed, forged in rivers, forests, and battles, was unbreakable. And as long as they stood together, nothing, not enemy ships, not hostile factions, not the dangers of the universe, could threaten them. The stars sparkled above, endless and bright, and the valley pulsed softly with energy. Elias Harper, human explorer and now guardian, gazed at the horizon. Beside him, the alien girl glowed with quiet power, confident, free, and ready to embrace her destiny. The journey that had begun with a rescue at a mountain river had grown into something extraordinary, a story of courage, trust, and the strength of the human spirit, reflected in the bonds formed across worlds. And in that moment, under twin moons and alien skies, Elias knew that no matter what the galaxy held, they would face it together, and the light of their courage and friendship would shine brighter than any darkness.